Terry, thank you for coming and sitting down with me about all the changes. Terry, you are the MLS Director at CCAR, and I am the Communications Director. So I know we are not normally in front of the camera, but I think this is important.
It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to hopefully clarify a few things and demystify
Absolutely.
some others, because based on the calls the department's receiving, there's still a bit of confusion as to what the NAR settlements brought to the real estate industry. And it's been somewhat accelerated by a national settlement coming down to the local levels, and I guess the width and breadth of the way it's being addressed within MLSs across the state, and even different areas when you're in a regional like we have.
Absolutely. And nationally, everyone has until the middle of August to make these changes that are required as part of the settlement, even though the settlement's not going to be finalized until the end of the year, right?
Correct.
So these changes we're already starting to see in the MLS, even though it's ahead of the date. We don't want to do these late.
No. The August 17th date is the date NAR chose to the implementation date that all MLSs across the country are shooting for, because a change of that width and breadth, it takes a while to creep into all of the entities that it's affecting, whether it's individual brokerages, the individual member, and especially the difference between MLSs across the country.
Yeah, this is not a small undertaking. So we're going to sit down. What we're going to talk about are the changes that our members have already begun to see in the MLS. And like we mentioned, all these changes are to adhere with the requirements of the NAR settlement. If our member still has questions regarding what that settlement is, we're not actually going to dive into that here. But there is good news. There's a lot of excellent resources that are already available. I know you and I have both been on those quite a bit. That's where we are getting a lot of our education. NAR is hosting live interactive webinars throughout the month of August to get members ready for these changes. And where they can register for those are facts.realtor.
Right.
Yep. And then those will be about all the changes, right?
Right. They're going to go, if you're a late bloomer or comer to the settlement, all those answers will be available there. The background, they're not going to delve into from the start to finish, but they're going to give you explanations of what it really means and the prime things that have been addressed by NAR. One of the main aspects was trying to tie the policy changes in with the actual documents that our members are going to be seeing, and the vast majority of those are either state provided or MLS provided. So I'm glad it all wasn't dumped onto one person's lap.
That would have been a lot. And what I love about the interactive webinar is, yes, that it's interactive, but also it's going to be hosted by NAR's legal staff. Right. So whether you're new to the settlement information or like a seasoned pro, I think being able to ask those questions and have legal advice will be really valuable. But like you said, the forms are not coming from NAR. Those are right now coming from Texas Realtors. And they have a walkthrough of the form updates and videos on how to navigate those form changes at texasrealestate.com/lawsuits. So facts.realtor for that interactive legal webinar coming up in August, and all the facts in the settlement, the timeline, everything's there. But if you're wondering about the forms, that would be texasrealestate.com/lawsuits. But I also know CCAR's Professional Development Education Department have implemented training on all the new forms and the changes in MLS in any of the classes that they're teaching currently. So if you take a matrix class or a forms class, that covers the new stuff, right?
Correct. And just like the settlement, the form changes have been somewhat a moving target, because even after they were released in the end of July, some of those forms, I know 2 of them were
I think
revised.
they were actually in June, end of
That's
June.
right,
Yeah.
June. They were released, and to give us some time to train and try to get all of the questions that we knew were going to come. Again, it's questions that we're getting from the MLS side that we can't address legal questions, but we can point you to where the forms are that are in, whether it's transaction desk or whatever the platform is that you're utilizing for those contracts and fill in. We can point you to where those documents are on those websites.
I think that's really important. We can tell you as an association what training is out there, what information is out there, where you find the resources, which is a lot, but how those resources are used and what you're expected to do in your daily practice, that needs to be a discussion between an agent and their broker, because every brokerage is going to have different policies. They're all going to adhere to the settlement guidelines and the settlement practice changes, but how your broker is implementing that should vary from broker to broker. You need to go to your broker to figure that out.
Yeah, it's the other layer that's in that sandwich that we've
Yep.
been building.
An important layer.
Yeah, probably the most important, because you're the broker that sponsors you, again, is directly responsible to TREC. They're responsible to uphold the settlement agreement. So that's where we're relying on brokers and agents to truly understand and get their questions answered now before they get. Don't use your client as a guinea pig to practice.
No, this is the time to be aware of what the settlement is, the practice changes, the resources, the new forms, what's changing, and how your broker wants you to implement that. So while I know there are a lot of resources out there, many of our members want to see someone they know, someone they talk to whenever they call in them with those questions, discuss what is happening and what to expect. So I'm happy that we have the opportunity to do that today. So we're sitting down to discuss the changes that the North Texas Real Estate Information Systems, our regional MLS, NTREIS, has already begun making in accordance with the settlement. So I know our members can access the actual redlined,
Right.
policy and procedures, as well as their bylaws that NTREIS put out.
Yeah, and the rules.
And the rules.
Changes.
There we go. So that's all in their info hub in the resource folder. So they can see actually redlined documents of what changed. I don't think many people care to read that. So let's sit down and talk about what was made in those changes. What have they begun to change?
So basically, when you look at the settlement, it was all dealing with offers of compensation and how those were communicated and described to the clients. So the settlement made it real simple. It removed the ability for that discussion to occur directly within the MLS system. It's got to be a discussion now that happens either in the listing agreement between the listing broker, agent, and the seller, or it's going to be on the buyer rep side discussed between the buyer, broker, agent, and their buyer. There's going to be more, again, hopefully transparency in everything that occurs compensation-wise and commission-related, with that discussion occurring in those arenas rather than it just being assumed that this is what's going to happen. It's going to take the form of all legal documents. It's not that the original agreement that you have in place can't change. It's just got to be documented well the way it's changing. It's not limiting the buyer or the agent from receiving, whether it's from a builder, the builder incentives that are out there, those will probably still be in place, but you're going to have to communicate that to the buyer as to how they receive that.
Will builder incentives be in the MLS still?
No, there will. The vast majority of builders kind of nested within NTREIS. Sure, we have a good number of actual builders that are broker participants, so they can get their listings directly in the system, but they don't have any advantage to a non-builder broker that's in the system. Those conversations still have to occur outside of MLS.
So this is in accordance with that MLS change, one of the big settlement changes, that offers of compensation cannot be in the MLS anymore, correct?
Correct.
But compensation still exists, obviously. Real estate agents are still doing a job, and cooperative compensation is still a possibility. It just needs to be discussed and negotiated outside of the MLS, right?
Correct. They've never been set or established by any entities other than the parties to the contracts.
Absolutely. It's always been negotiable. That field, it's been blank. It's been something that's been negotiated between an agent and a client. But now whatever they determine is the compensation. There's not a field for that in the MLS anymore, right?
Correct. There's no longer the BAC, the SAC fields, any percentage or dollar amount.
And beyond that field's not there, it is not appropriate to put that in the descriptions or any other roundabout way of doing that.
Correct. There should not be any use of a field for other than what the field label is. The existing rules and regs that are in place for what can be in public remarks, what can be in the agent remarks area. And again, the timeliness of changes occurring, I guess from our aspects of recording this today, agent, when we walk out of this room, if they go into MLS, they're going to see that, yeah, they're gone.
Just gone. Yeah. So if you had it from a previous listing,
it's gone.
It's gone. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist in your contract and that it shouldn't be communicated with agents, but that field is not there.
Correct.
Now, what about the seller concession? I know part of the settlement was that can be something that is offered by sellers, right?
Right. So the way that concessions were addressed in the settlement was they're still able to be offered. But again, a true concession in the terminology of NAR cannot have any tie to using it for broker compensation. The buyer's got to be the person that those concessions are made to. They got to be specific, whether it's they're offering repair dollars, whether they're
carpet.
offering closing costs, or they just give you a dollar amount and said, use it for whatever you feel most need of in making the transaction work for the buyer.
So where will a NTREIS subscriber see that? Now, do we have a field for that they can say, here's $10,000 to replace the carpet? Is that what they're going to see?
No, it's a pretty simplistic way that NTREIS chose to address it. It's going to be a label of concession, and then a yes. And again, it's optional for the use of it. The listing brokers and the seller are going to decide what they want to display, whether it's nothing or they want to say yes or no. There will not be any dollar amounts, there won't be any percentages. So that is somewhat a conversation opener. It's not, until you directly ask, you will not know.
Yeah.
It may not be the dollar amount or the percentage that you expected, but just like everything else, it's all negotiable.
Absolutely. And these are trained professionals who negotiate. That's one of their expertise in this field. So I think this is going to be a smooth transition, but it will be a change for our members to have to pick up the phone and get that information. I saw you selected yes. I saw you selected yes, there are seller concessions. What are those if I'm a buyer agent?
What are the boundaries that your seller has agreed to work with?
Absolutely.
And hopefully what we will find is that doesn't stop you from making an offer that is, again, in the best interest of your client.
Well, that's their fiduciary responsibility, is getting their client the best home.
You're doing what you have always done. It's just a little more regimented in how you're going to get there and what it's going to take to get the other side to execute it.
Right. So what we've been talking about is the change to compensation being communicated in the MLS. It will no longer be in the MLS. And this kind of pairs with the second change of the two practice changes, one that there would be a buyer's rep agreement. Texas has already had these. But before an agent tours a home with anyone, they're going to have a buyer's rep agreement, which will lay out how they'll be compensated in case you get to the point of closing where a seller's not offering any compensation. A buyer's already had that hard conversation. Those buyer rep agreements, are they uploaded into NTREIS before you tour? How are those? Is there any uploading of a buyer rep agreement before touring a home?
The buyer rep doesn't take on the same aspect as a listing agreement. There may be some questioning from the listing agent and the seller as to, are you truly representing the buyer, or are you trying to take a position of not representing the buyer? And basically the settlement says you have to be representing and make your position known at the onset of working with a listing broker or agent.
And the specifics of that, like I referenced, the buyer's rep could be an opportunity to detail compensation before touring a home. But NAR settlement has not gone into all the details of what's required in that buyer's rep agreement. Just that there is a buyer's rep agreement before touring a home.
Right.
And those forms are available for agents to use.
Yeah, we have the forms out there. It's just the idea that, again, they've never been dictated or established that they got to be. It's up for the buyer and that agent to have the conversation. And it doesn't have to take the the same. It's got to be specific in how it's calculated and how it's expressed when you in the buyer rep agreement or in the actual contract. Thinking that the only way compensation can be explained or calculated is a percentage or a dollar amount, it could take the form of a rate per hour.
Yeah.
It could take the
And always
a day
could have.
rate.
Always
Yeah,
could have.
They could always been that way.
So it's not going to be treated as a listing agreement, though. It's not something that needs to be uploaded. It could be verified by the listing agent. But no matter how it's treated, it is required, this buyer's rep, before touring a home.
Right.
And then whenever you have a listing agreement, you're not going to have the offers of compensation listed in the MLS. It's still going to exist, still going to be communicated, but it's not going to have a field in the MLS. And those are the two practice changes, right, that our agents are going to be experiencing now. This is happening now, even though the settlement won't be finalized until the end of the year. Practice changes are happening now. And then have to be completed by August 17th.
Correct. And when you're talking, again, a national settlement that's affecting so many members, it's like a good faith move.
I will say something that's so encouraging about the realtor industry is that this is not the first change that's happened. Key boxes were a change. The MLS system itself was a change. Seller disclosure forms were a change. Yeah. This is not the first change, nor will it be the last in our industry, but I do believe they've always made our industry better. And I think this will do the same. It's going to be a change, though. Is there anything else regarding changes to MLS that our members should be aware of coming?
One of the aspects that is in the settlement agreement is, again, how the communication of it is being adopted. Like I said, currently the ability of a brokerage to utilize their websites or the broker websites under the existing IDX or virtual office policies. Some, again, we're getting from the NTREIS side, we did not adopt or provide any way for that to occur. And NTREIS has never, I guess, pre-approved any IDX vendor or provider or virtual office website provider. The tools that a broker and that vendor chose to place on their website, the only thing that NTREIS reviews and on an ongoing basis is whether the data licensing agreement that the broker and the vendor have executed meets the policy and the licensing agreement is not being misused in the way that the tool.
So these IDX things, these are the feeds that brokers can have that go onto their website that has the listings or any kind of add-on that goes to that. So NTREIS is not going to be hands-on on how they're complying with the settlement.
Right.
But putting it on your website, an outside website, is not against the settlement.
Correct. The only caveat to that is that the only offers that can be on your website are for your own listing inventory.
Right.
It can't contain any other broker offers. So that's why the IDX vendors are building tools to allow their customers to address that issue.
To where their feeds that go to their website could populate their listing offers of compensation,
Right.
but not include other ones.
Correct. And again, as some of them that we've gotten questions are, like I said, we've never reviewed the tool, but I think the vendor and the broker and agents that are trying to find out how to make those changes, they're trying to be a bridge between both the broker, the agent, and the MLS, making sure that they understand this is the settlement agreement as it stands right now. That's not been approved by the court.
We're not to preliminary approval.
Right.
It's not finalized, though.
And the broker and agent need to make sure they're getting their direct advice from their own legal counsel that they trust and feel confident in the way they move forward, and not try to place that monkey back on the NTREIS. And again, NTREIS isn't saying they have to approve whatever tool you choose, but you need to get legal counsel to review and understand what the vendor is proposing and
make
how
sure it's compliant.
used.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, make those decisions, and that should be a broker by broker decision.
Right.
What about showing services? Are that should how do those play in?
Again, in our market, we primarily utilize showing time and broker bay. It would be against the licensing agreement that's in place for both showing time and broker bay to try to utilize their platforms to include that offer of compensation.
I think that's a good. I'm glad, because I feel like that would be going against the heart of what the settlement is.
Right.
Is that it would be negotiated and communicated outside the MLS.
And the appointment and showing services have been too integrated into the MLS platform that the expectation of it being manipulated or not used for, that's why the licensing agreement was executed and developed that way. It's not that we had a crystal ball and knew that was coming. We just knew that the tools that agents and brokers are being presented, seems like every other week there's a new tool that is being promoted to enhance the way you operate as a agent and broker, but along the lines of the MLS being that fair, level field that we've always thought of it as being.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be, right? Fair marketplace.
Cooperation.
Yep, absolutely. Clear cooperation. All right. So I think we covered a lot here. That is another podcast. So if someone is inclined to want to read that red line version of the policy and procedures, the rules and regulations, the rules and regs, and the bylaws of NTREIS, those will be in our info hub at CCAR.net.
Right.
There's a square, they'll click the info hub. They can use their NTREIS credentials to log in. And then there's a little folder that says resources, and in there they'll see all the goodies. If they don't want to read that, they listen to us talk. They know what's changed. If we need training on forms, we have that in-house here at CCAR, any of our forms classes,
Right.
MLS classes. If you want to watch it on demand to see the form changes, it's
Posted.
Texas. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. They can watch ours recorded in their info hub. Or they can go to texasrealestate.com/lawsuits. They have it there. They can look at all the forms. And then if someone's wanting to have an interactive webinar with the NAR legal team, that would be at facts.realtor. So I think we have answered the high level questions, but they can also call, right? If they want to walk through some of this, they can call us here at CCAR.
Or email mls@ccar.net.
Awesome. Yep. The resources are endless. We'll get here. We're already making the changes. We'll be compliant by August 17th. And if anything else changes, we will come back to this table.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.